Namaskar. The Narasimha Rao years, June 1991 to May 1996. Pamulaparthi Venkata P.V. Narasimha Rao was chosen to lead the Congress I after Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. Narasimha Rao was an erudite scholar and knew several languages, and he was a Congress loyalist. He had held important ministerial posts, the external affairs, defense, human resources, and home in the governments of Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. After the elections, he formed a minority government. Narasimha Rao himself had not contested elections in 1991, probably with the intention of retiring from politics, but after he was sworn in a prime minister, he won in a by-election from Nandyal in Andhra Pradesh to become a member of the Lok Sabha. Rao is best remembered for the economic reforms undertaken by his government. However, he has other achievements to his credit as well, and a few blots as well. Economic reform by overcome sorry economic reform. On becoming Prime Minister, Narasimha Rao inducted Manmohan Singh, a non-political economist who was at the time chairman of the University Grants Commission, into his cabinet as finance minister. He backed his finance minister in all the steps he took, and he took a few on his own. As industries minister, he also managed the reactions, especially within the Congress party, which were not initially in favor of reform when socialism had been the basic approach under Nehru and Indira Gandhi. The economy of India was in shambles. Beside the precarious balance of payment situation, the most domestic scene was not good with high inflation. When Rao became prime minister, the Soviet economic model was discredited. China under Deng Xiaoping had undertaken market-oriented reforms. Narasimha Rao also opted for market reforms, but not the free market type. He opted for the middle path. He focused on reforms that would produce the least pain to the masses in general, even while producing high growth rates. The government approach was not radically reformist. There was to be no bank privatization or staff reforms, nor would there be no opening up of the farm sector. The new economic policy of 1991 aimed at correcting the weaknesses on the fiscal and balance of payments fronts to stabilize the economy. On the structural reform side, the policy sought to remove the rigidities that infested the various sectors of the economy, and an effort was to be made to control inflation and release industries from unnecessary controls and regulations so that hurdles in the way of growth would be removed. The fundamentals of the new economic model were to be liberalization, privatization, and globalization. The rupee was devalued. Manmohan Singh explained that this would help export. The budget took a bold step of correcting fiscal imbalance by reducing the fiscal deficit. Singh initiated the gradual reduction of import duties, income tax, and corporate tax. The finance minister, with the support of his prime minister, especially targeted the highly restrictive trade and industrial policies. The quotas on the imports of most machinery and equipment and manufactured intermediate goods were removed. There was a rationalization of the tariff structure and reduction in custom duties, especially on capital goods. Imports of technology were freed. The industrial policy of 1991 was revolutionary for the times. Significantly, Narasimha Rao himself held the industry's portfolio. The industrial licensing system was made applicable to a much shortened list of environmentally sensitive or security-related industries. The MRTP Act was modified to remove sections that restricted growth or prevented merger of large business forces. The industries reserved for the public sector was drastically reduced. The public sector was also granted more autonomy. Private investment was made welcome in the infrastructural sector. The restrictions on foreign ownership were liberalized. Foreign investment was gradually liberalized. The service sector was also liberalized, with private sector allowed to invest in insurance, banking, telecom, and air travel sectors. The Rao government abolished the control of capital issues, which governed capital issues in India, introduced the SEBI Act of 1992 and the Security Laws Amendment to regulate all security market intermediaries, and started the National Stock Exchange as a computer-based trading system. The system may not have been wholly reformed because of bureaucratic control. It still took much more time to start a business in India when compared to China or Malaysia. Labor laws were not reformed, and the process of exit for lodging enterprises continued to be difficult. Panchayati Raj and Nagarpalika Acts. Though it was Rajiv Gandhi who had initiated the move, it was during the time when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister that the Panchayati Raj and municipal government got constitutional status with the enactment of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment. A new chapter, Part 9, was inserted in the Constitution of India. A new 11th schedule covering 29 subjects within the functions of the panchayats was also added. The amendment is an implementation of one of the directive principles of state policy. States have been given flexibility to take into consideration their geographical, political, administrative and other conditions while adopting the Panchayati Raj system. With the enactment of the 74th Amendment to the Constitution, a new chapter, Part 9A, has been added to the Constitution. States now have a constitutional obligation to adopt municipalities as per the system prescribed in the Constitution. In both panchayats and municipal bodies, there is reservation for SC/ST and women. This is an attempt to ensure that there is inclusiveness in local self-government. Handling security issues and space tech. In the Punjab situation was controlled. Rao went in for state elections. Though there were misgivings, it was for the good, as after the 2002 elections militancy died down. The Terrorist Disruptive Activities Prevention Act was passed, mainly directed towards eliminating the infiltrators from Pakistan. The modernization of the defense sector was given importance and military spending was increased. Prithvi-1 missile was inducted into the army. It is widely believed that it was Narasimha Rao who made sure that India's nuclear program made progress. Space technology progressed with successful tests of the augmented satellite launch vehicle as well as the polar satellite launch vehicle. Foreign policy. The Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991 and the Indians were forced to rethink their foreign policy, as there was no Cold War and bloc politics now had no place in international relations. India's relations with the US gradually improved, but India also tried to build up strong relations with other nations of the West as well as with Japan, Israel, Brazil and South Africa. Post-Cold War, India's foreign policy became closely linked with its economic policy. Rao launched the Look East policy in an attempt to bring India closer to ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The strategy involved the creation of close economic and commercial ties, bringing about an increased cooperation in strategic and security matters, and an emphasis on age-old cultural and ideological connections between India and the region. The policy has over time served to strengthen India's political, economic and cultural relations with the countries of South Asia and the Pacific, besides helping India become an important part of the economic and security dynamics of the region. Significantly, the policy was taken up by the governments that came after Narasimha Rao's overtures to China, which he visited in 1993, and Iran were useful when Pakistan brought a resolution on India's violation of human rights in Kashmir in the human rights body of the UN. China and Iran did not favor it. Negative aspects. There were two main criticisms against Narasimha Rao. One was that he allowed the Babri Masjid demolition, and other was corruption. The Babri Masjid demolition. In the late 1990s, the Bharatiya Janata Party had racked up the issue of Ram Janmabhoomi to its advantage in the 1991 elections. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad (VHP) was even more vociferous and aggressive on the issue and began organizing protests and demonstrations in Ayodhya and in other parts of the country, demanding a temple at the site of the Babri Masjid. There was apparently some demolition and a building at the site earlier itself was, but Earlier it said about that the administration took no notice. Uttar Pradesh was under BJP rule and the chief minister at the time was Kalyan Singh. The BHP announced that on December 6, 1992, work on the temple would begin. The thousands of volunteers, the Kar Sevaks, converged on Ayodhya, while the plan announced was that prayers would be held on a platform near the mosque. When the time came, crowds of Kurd Sevaks were moving towards the mosque despite being asked not to by the RSS and the police. The crowd became quite uncontrollable and not amenable to region. Their one intention being to demolish the mosque. They were armed with iron rods and other tools and had soon scaled the mosque walls. The BJP leaders gathered there, such as L.K. Advani, are reported to have called these Karsebaks back, but to no avail. The police did little to control the situation. The mosque was soon attacked and reduced to rubble. The mosque clarified that it was not a party to the vandalism and that it was an unfortunate thing to have happened. It was more than unfortunate, it was tragic and ominous and would have long-term repercussions. The BJP leaders were arrested and communal riots broke out in Uttar Pradesh and many other parts of the country, resulting in many deaths. Bombay was one of the worst sufferers, with the Shiv Sena stoking the violence. In 1993, there were bomb blasts in the city at strategic locations orchestrated by a couple of mafia dons based in Dubai, apparently in retaliation for the attacks on Muslims earlier. The fact that Kalyan Singh did nothing to stop the situation from turning ugly cannot be condoned. As a chief minister, he was an authority of the state and he should have upheld the law and enforced it. What shocked many and aroused criticism was the non-action of the centre. Surely, it was pointed out, President's rule should have been imposed in anticipation of trouble, and central forces should have been given firm orders to intervene and control the situation. Maybe the Prime Minister did not want himself and his party to be dubbed anti-Hindu by taking firm action. The Uttar Pradesh government was dismissed and President's rule imposed on the state only after the destruction had taken place. India's image was damaged world over because of this event and its aftermath of riots. There were dire predictions that India would be reduced to one of those lawless countries with ineffective government or become a dictatorship of some kind. The predictions did not come true, but the Babri Masjid demolition remains a plot in the history of modern India that continues to echo down, down the years ominously in societies where there had so far been no open antagonism between Hindus and Muslims, though a sense of between Hindus and Muslims, in society, in society where there had so far been no open antagonism between Hindus and Muslims, though a sense of victimhood was felt by both and communal riots did occur, now there was open suspicion and even hostility between the two communities. It would not be fair or true to say that every Muslim and every Hindu felt that way, but the general impression to that effect had been created. Liverhan Commission. A commission was appointed 10 days after the Babri Masjid demolition by order of the Home Ministry. The one-man commission comprising Justice Liverhan, a sitting judge of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, was assigned the task of probing the sequence of events that led to the occurrences at the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid complex on December 6, 1992, resulting in the destruction of the structure. The commission submitted its report some 17 years later in June 2009 when the UPA was in the government. The commission indicted top BJP leaders and held 68 people culpable, including L.K. Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Kalyan Singh. The then Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh identified the Kalyan Singh-led BJP government in Uttar Pradesh as the key to the execution of the conspiracy to demolish Babri Masjid. The report of the commission apparently contained no criticism of the 1992 Indian government and then Prime Minister and the then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. It accepted Rao's contention that it was not possible to legally and constitutionally impose president's rule in Uttar Pradesh in December 1992 before the event corruption scandals. Till July 1993, the Narasimha Rao government ran smoothly, though technically it was a minority government. But in July 1993, the opposition had decided to test the strength of the government and brought in a non-confidence motion. The government side on its own did not have the numbers to pass the test. When the no confidence motion was put to vote, it was found that some members belonging to the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha (JMM) and the Janata Dal Ajit Singh group had voted against the motion, thus enabling the government to win the vote and remain in power for the full 5-year term. It was later challenged that the JMM members had been bribed by Narasimha Rao through a representative. In 1996, after Rao was no longer Prime Minister, investigations in the case took place. A special court convicted Rao and his colleague Butta Singh, who is alleged to have taken the MPs to the Prime Minister. However, on appeal to a higher court, the decision was overturned, mainly due to the doubt attached to, attached. Sorry. However, on appeal to a higher court, the decision was overturned, mainly due to the doubt attached to the credibility of Mahato, who said he had taken the bribe. Both Rao and Butta Singh were cleared of the charges in 2002. Rao's name was also dragged into the Harshad Mehta stock market scam and then in the Hawala and Lakhubhai cheating cases. Rao was cleared in both cases. Rao may not have been convicted in any of the cases, but in the public mind, the whiff of corruption never faded. Kashmir, even as Hindu religious feelings were being whipped up in India by certain groups, there was growing Islamic fundamentalism in the Kashmir Valley. It was in the 1990s and in the 1990s that militancy grew with the active help of Pakistan. Religious sentiment was identified and linked to the liberation of Kashmir from the Indian state. The cry was from jihad, and groups such as the Lashkar-e-Toiba wanted Kashmir to join Pakistan. This group was rapidly gaining prominence, trying to suppress other groups such as JKLF, which wanted independence rather than joining Pakistan, and working for vengeance against India for its role in the creation of Bangladesh. The fundamentalism was not confined to fighting the Indian state machinery, but extended to changing the way of life, with banning cinema, smoking, and drinking alcohol, besides compelling women to wear the burqa. The Pandits bore the brunt of the actions of the militants. They were forced to leave their homes in Kashmir and become refugees. General elections of 1996. In May 1996, Narasimha Rao resigned following the resounding defeat of the Congress in the general elections. He also resigned from the post of party chief. Later, the elections were fought along three themes: Ayodhya, economy, corruption. Lines were drawn along religious and caste. Besides, the Congress was torn by factions and many accusations were made against the Narasimha Rao government from within the party itself for mishandling situation and corruption charges. In the circumstances, the verdict was fractured. No party got enough seats to form a government on its own. The BJP won the most seats, 161, while its allies formed of Samta Party 6 and Haryana Vikas Party won a total of 26 seats, thus making the BJP set a total 187 seats. The Congress hold the second position, while the National Front, composed of Janata Dal, Telugu Desam and Left Front, won 114 seats. Another feature that marked the 1996 general elections was that several strong regional and caste and state parties showed no interest in allying with any of the three main contenders for power. Rise of the Dalit voice. Even as political parties were getting to represent people on the basis of religious in the OBCs, the Dalits, much more commonly used now than the official scheduled caste or the Gandhian term Harijan, were also being consolidated into being represented by their own party. In earlier times, the Congress had always drawn the Dalit votes, and after the death of Ambedkar, the Dalits found a leader in Jagjivan Ram. The Congress in this aspect was challenged only by the Republican Party in Maharashtra and by the more militant Dalit Panthers also in the same state, but alongside as far back as in the 1970s. Kansi Ram, having quit his government job, had mobilized Dalit government employees into an organization, the All India Backward and Minority Communities Employees Federation (BAMCEF). This organization attracted a large number of followers, encouraged Kansi Ram started a political party, the Bahujan Samaj Party (BSP), which, as indicated by the choice of the name Bahujan, was to represent not just Dalits but other backward castes as well as Muslims and other as well as over time the area of influence was mainly Uttar Pradesh. The Dalits were drawn by the narrative that the BSP represented, that the Congress was merely using them as vote banks, whereas the BSP stood for social justice and change that would take the Dalits along the path of progress. The BSP fought the 1984 elections but won no seat, though it got quite a few votes in the Uttar Pradesh state elections. It made an impressive showing. In 1993, the party won more than 60 seats, mostly drawing away votes from the Congress, and became a major player in Uttar Pradesh politics alongside the Samajwadi Party and the BJP. Mayawati, a protege of Kansi Ram, succeeded him as the leader of the BSP. She was the one who built up alliances with other caste groups and political parties. She won a Lok Sabha seat in 1999. In 1995, in June 1995, she created history by becoming the first ever Dalit woman in India to serve as the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. Though her term in office was short, in later years she was to come back as Chief Minister of the state. In 2007, she became Chief Minister, and this time she stayed in that post till sorry in 2007 in 2007 in 2007 in 2007 in 2007 she became chief minister, and this time she stayed in that post till 2012. Dhanyawad. Thank you so much.